Most people view net worth as a single, uninterrupted ladder. You save, the number goes up, and you get richer. But that model is mathematically incomplete. As you accumulate capital, you pass through specific thresholds where the rules of the game change, shifting how your money behaves and what it can legally do. At each of these tiers, you gain access to a different set of options. The tax treatment, investment vehicles, and professional services available to someone with $5 million are structurally different from those available to someone with $50,000. It isn't about secret wisdom. It's about reaching the mathematical scale required to participate in different financial structures. The problem is that many people cross these thresholds without realizing the environment has changed. They apply the same tactics to a $1 million portfolio that they used for their first $10,000, resulting in a high paper net worth with almost no actual financial flexibility. To understand which game you're actually playing, we have to look at the composition of your wealth. Total net worth is often an inflated metric. When you strip out home equity and illiquid retirement accounts you can't touch for decades, you're left with your working capital. This liquid investable base is the only number that dictates your moves. We are going to map the 5 specific inflection points where the behavior of capital shifts and expose the traps that can stall your progress at every level. The first milestone is $100,000. Charlie Munger, the late vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, was blunt about the difficulty of this space. He famously argued that you have to reach this capital base by any means necessary, even if it means walking everywhere and using every coupon, because of the mathematical shift that happens once you arrive. This chart shows the flywheel effect. To reach your first $100,000 through savings and a standard 7% return takes roughly 7 or 8 years. You are the engine. Your contributions do nearly 90% of the work. But the next $100,000 takes only 5 years, and the jump from $900,000 to $1 million takes barely over a year. The math takes over. The primary trap at this stage is lifestyle inflation. Just as the compounding engine starts to generate its own momentum, many people reward themselves by upgrading their car or apartment. By dropping their savings rate, they effectively stall the engine precisely when it finally became efficient. If you keep the engine running to $500,000, you hit the income inflection point. At this level, a diversified portfolio can generate enough passive yield to cover basic living expenses in many parts of the country without you ever touching the principal. This level of liquid capital changes how you navigate the labor market. When you have a multi-year financial backstop, you carry yourself differently in negotiations. You have the stability required to decline work you don't want, and the confidence to pursue higher stakes raises because you aren't living paycheck to paycheck. The trap here is the liquidity gap. $500,000 in home equity builds wealth over time, but it produces zero passive income today. If your $500,000 is locked in your primary residence, you lack the professional leverage that $500,000 in liquid assets provides. The headline number is the same, but the utility is not. Reaching this milestone is less about the halfway point to $1 million and more about the transition from depending on an employer to having the capacity to dictate your own terms. At $1 million in liquid assets, you enter the access phase. This is where your legal status changes to an accredited investor under SEC definitions. This status removes the barriers to private real estate syndications, venture capital, and hedge funds. These structures are gated from the general public by law, but once you cross this threshold, the investment universe expands beyond standard retail options. This is also where the math of fee drag becomes a significant structural issue. A 1% advisory fee on a small account feels like a minor expense, but on a $1 million portfolio, it is $10,000 a year. Over time, that cost compounds, pulling directly from the capital that should be working for you. Look at the difference over 30 years. 2 identical portfolios with identical 7% returns. The one in a low-cost index fund grows to $6.79 million. The one paying a 1% fee grows to $5.74 million. That is a $1 million gap created by a single variable, cost. Between $3 and $5 million, you enter the architecture phase. You become a qualified purchaser, granting access to institutional-level funds. And your portfolio now produces enough cash flow to make employment entirely optional. The risk at this level is continuing to act like an investor instead of an architect. Wealth on this scale is vulnerable to taxes and probate. If you haven't restructured your assets into trusts and LLCs, a significant portion of what you've built can be lost during the transfer to the next generation. Finally, at $10 million and above, you reach the infrastructure phase. At this scale, wealth is no longer just a collection of stocks. It is a complex operational system. Ultra-high net worth families often use family offices, operational teams that manage everything from cross-border liquidity to charitable foundations and estate taxes. The money itself becomes secondary to the architecture required to maintain and protect it across decades. At these highest tiers, the objective shifts. It is no longer about simply accumulating more wealth, but about building the legal and operational systems required to prevent it from eroding. Because the rules change at every threshold, the habits that get you to your first milestone can often hinder you at the later ones. Your strategy must be contextual to your current phase. If you have less than $100,000, your only priority is your savings rate and time. Your contributions are the primary lever for growth, and consistency is the only way to activate the flywheel. Between $100,000 and $1 million, your focus must shift to efficiency. This is the time to optimize for fees, utilize tax-advantaged accounts like HSAs, and understand the legal access that opens up as you approach accredited status. Above $3 million, the math of accumulation is largely finished. Your primary task is hiring the right expertise to build the estate and trust infrastructure needed to protect your assets from tax and legal leaks. Low-cost index investing can move anyone through these stages, but ignoring the shifting rules of the game will leave you compounding your mistakes for decades. The most expensive way to build wealth is to do it without adjusting your strategy to the milestone you've actually reached.